you can say I love you a million different ways. A reverent actor is going to go, no, you got to say it like this. Well, why? And I always fought Eric. I was like, I don't understand why. I mean, you know what I mean? Why can't you? How do you feel right now? Well, I'm annoyed. I don't want to be here. I'm hungry. I'm pissed off. Then say I love you. I love you. Well, why can't, if that's real, why can't you say I love you like that? Why does it have to be like, I love you? Because that's the concept.
All right. We're here with Brennan Elliott, actor,
house.
producer.
Sometimes, yeah. when they allow me to work with the money.
Listen, I'm going to do, well, here's what your Wikipedia said.
Oh, God.
Brennan Elliott was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Well, they got that right.
Of Clan Elliott.
No, it's not true.
Sounds very heavy.
It's very not true.
Well, let's skip that part. He was educated at the prestigious Actors Studio at the Juilliard School.
They made a mistake. I studied a lot of places. Both those places I did study at, but not at the same time.
Okay. I'm very interested.
Juilliard was more workshops with Michael Kahn and different improv workshops and stuff. I didn't go to their 4-year program.
Right.
And then at the Actors Studio, and then with Eric Morris, of course, who you know well.
Right.
He was my mentor. But I don't know how they get these things. I don't know how they get these things. They had me at 6'4". I'm 5'11". So I mean, there's
we
another
saw
thing.
that. That was
like,
great.
Wow.
We're like,
obviously I grew.
I didn't remember.
Bring the cameras
that,
up.
Can we get this up a little bit? I got a little height on me. You might have read about it.
And one of his first screen appearances was in the music video for Tom Cochrane's 1991 song "Life Is a Highway."
Yeah, I have the name of this podcast. It's called Humble Pie.
Why?
You're bringing me back to that was my very first job, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Your very first job. How did you get that?
It was obviously wanted to be an actor. I was 18. I wanted to take a year off after finishing high school and figure out, how was I going to get to New York and study with places I wanted to study at. And I was working with a guy named Dean Doberstein at Theater Masquerade, who's really, really brilliant teacher. And through his agent, there was auditions for this rock video, and I thought I'd never auditioned before, so let me go try it out. Well, the night before, in Canada, hockey's a big thing. So the night before, one of my buddies got accepted he got chosen to be one of the top lines on the Saskatoon Blades. It's a kind of a big deal, minor league team. So we went out for beers and started drinking. And I had been told by my mother that my audition was in the afternoon. Well, there'd been a flip, and it was at like 10 a.m.
Oh, my God.
No one had called me to tell me what to wear, what was I'm supposed to do. They just said, show up. It's going to be an impromptu kind of improv thing. So I got the phone call in the morning. Well, that night, when we partied, I actually had to go to the hospital because I drank too much. Wow. And it was a pretty scary thing. And was very, very ill. And anyway, to make a long story short, I was in bed, obviously, with the worst hangover I've ever had since in my life. And my mom woke me up and she goes, if you want to be an actor, you're going to go. You're going to go sick. You're going to go. If you're dying, you're going to go and you're going to commit and you're going to. And I was like, all right. And I was just ill. Well, I got there. All these guys are in leather jackets and cowboy boots. Like 10, 15, 20 dudes just lined up. And I was in I think I had running shoes on, jeans, and a sweater. And I thought, oh, no. And there was a guy there, Patrick, who I knew him, because he was in another school called Western, and they played football together. And I knew of him, and I'd met him a couple times at a party here and there and stuff. So anyway, he gave me his jacket and his boots. But he's like 5'6", and I was like 5'11". So I have these boots on, and they're way too small, and I'm wearing this jacket that's too tight, and I didn't care. And I went in, and there was the girl that was the lead who got cast. She was supposed to choose who she wants. And there was David Story, and there was a couple other people in there, producer-wise, and they said, do something spontaneous. Make us laugh or something. I didn't even know what the video was. I didn't even know who Tom Cochrane was. And I stood on my hands. I used to be able to walk on my hands back in the day. And I stood on my hands, and I everywhere.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I vomited. And all I remember is people laughing. She was not. She was kind of like this. And I said, I'm so sorry. And they were like, are you okay? And I told them a little bit about the story the night before, and I walked out. And I gave the jacket to Patrick, and they were all like, what the fuck? What happened out there? Gave him my stuff, went home, went to bed. I was like, I'm not getting this, no way. And then 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the agent I had at the time, that was a modeling agent, got a hold of Dean's agent, and they wanted to find out how to get a hold of me. I had no theater agent or anything. I had a modeling. It was more of a commercial thing because I thought I'll go on some commercials, which I never went on. And I got it. And that was it. And then I remember we were driving to Red Deer, Alberta, which is a small town outside of Calgary, to shoot this thing. Well, it was actually Drumheller. And I said, can I hear the song? you know, Mr. Research guy at the
Already,
time.
absolutely.
And they played the song, and I heard it, and I went, whoa, this is going to be, because it was so catchy.
Yeah.
And then we got there and met Tom Cochrane, and you know, those rock stars, they like to have their nights, so I had to partake with them a couple of times because I wanted to fit. And he was lovely, and the song was a massive hit, and that was my first gig.
Monster hit, yeah.
Oh, it was Grammy winner and everything else. Not unbeknownst to me. That was my first little kind of little sniff of fame, whatever that means. But I was in a bar with a girl I was dating at the time, and they had the big screen TVs up, and the video played, and I was the first time I ever saw it. I was just like, you know, that beginning, life is, and I was like this, and there's people everywhere, and there's me driving the car, and I thought, well, it doesn't get any better than this. Yeah, you know, that lasted about an hour, and then it was over. But it was cool. But yeah, it was my first gig.
So then you're there. You're in Canada. You've decided you want to be an actor. So the thought is to go to New York.
Well, the thought was just for me, and Dean was my first real mentor. He basically said, just gather training from everywhere. He wasn't a big believer in, you got to go to this school and that school. So I was obviously a big fan of Montgomery Clift. Has always been somebody that's my favorite. And, you know, obviously Brando and Pacino and Daniel Day-Lewis and all the, you know, De Niro, all those guys. Winters, Shelley Winters is a genius. So I just wanted to go to places. So I like researching, you know, so I went and Cindy Christensen, who was a friend of mine, was at Neighborhood Playhouse and did workshops with her, and then tried to get into the Actors Studio, tried to get into their program, but didn't. But they were having workshops, and they wanted to keep me around for the next auditions, and I didn't have any money, but I still was training with them. And then
Who did you work with at the Actors Studio?
Well, Ian McKellen was there. Not the actor. His name is Ian McKellen, and he was at Neighborhood and would come. And all these teachers would come around at different schools and teach different things, and I just sucked it all up. And Michael Kahn was doing improv at Juilliard, and didn't get in there either, but it was fine because I didn't want to be in a 4-year program or two. I wanted to kind of just take from this and this and this. Yeah. And that's when I came across Eric's work. No Acting Please was the first book, and he was at the Actors Studio, and then I thought was dead or something. I didn't even know the guy was alive, and found out he lived in Los Angeles. Being a Canadian, you need a green card, and you need to be legal to work at these places, and I obviously couldn't at the time. So when money ran out, I'd go back to Calgary and I'd work, and then I auditioned for one of our big programs in Canada called Studio 58. And they take 12 in the country, and I got in there. So that was kind of the first program that, I mean, I was in the University of Calgary for a year or two, hated that program. I wasn't a big theorem, let's build sets guy. Like, I wanted to learn how to act. I don't give a crap on anything else.
Right.
And the University of Calgary was kind of more of an academic program. They had some good teachers and stuff, but it was kind of just, I was learning, and I was falling on my face, and I was failing, and I was, like, making mistakes, and I was doing plays. And then when I got into the Studio 58, that was a very English-based training program, very theatrical, and I wanted to find stuff that didn't look like acting, something that I'm passionate about, and I always felt that I was watching acting. Yeah. And they were trying to get me to do that. Like, they would be like if you're supposed to be screaming at somebody in a scene, they would have people start out to in, you know, just scream, you know, and I'd be like, well, I don't believe them. I just don't buy it. So I'd be like, well, I need to feel what choices can I work with that'll elicit or let me organically experience the frustration or the rage or the pain or the hurt towards somebody where that scream will come. And I remember Eric told me a great saying when I first signed with him. He says, you know, most acting classes teach objectives and, you know, wanting water when you're in the desert, you know, because you're thirsty. And he says, if you can create as an artist the thirst, you're dying of thirst sensorially, you're really going to want that water organically in the moment. It's going to be believable. And so that's the guy that I really, really gravitated towards. His style, his teachings. And was in New York and was studying and did some off-Broadway plays. It was at Cherry Lane and did Fool for Love, which was my first kind of on-stage thing. And I just didn't, you know, when I was doing I had moments, and then I had moments where I was just always learning, like, how do I have the moment I just had, which I don't know how I got there all the time. So I was just a student. I mean, I was in my early 20s, just training. And I said I was never going to go be a professional actor until I at least felt like I knew how to do this because the competition's so great. And I just chose to make sure I learned it before I went out. But there was also personal reasons. I mean, I don't know if anybody's heard of Dean Dover, or not, of Keith Johnstone. He wrote the book Improv. Yeah, he created improvisation out of England. Well, he was my very first teacher before I met Dean when I was about 16. We did improv games and stuff, much like Improv Olympic here in Los Angeles. He created improv, like that was his thing. And he was in his late 70s when I met him. And I might have been the first time I met him. I think I just turned 15, or if I was 14, I think, and I got on stage, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought this is fun way to meet chicks or something. I didn't know what we were doing here. I thought, oh, fun, improv games. And he got me on stage, and he was this big, burly guy. And he always ate a cookie and had a coffee. It was always a cookie and a coffee. And he'd be like, and he asked me for the first time, how do you feel right now? Mm. And it wasn't Eric Morris or being workout. It was just, I mean, indirectly it was. And I said, oh, I'm cool. Yeah. No, I'm good. I'm great. This is fun. Like, whatever, right? And he's like, bullshit. I don't believe a word you're saying. And I was like, because I grew up in this environment where I feel like I needed to please my mom, or I was needing love from my stepdad, or I didn't, I didn't have a forum to be my true self and have my real feelings. And so I said, well, that's how I feel. And he was pissing me off. He goes, tell me how you really feel. I go, well, you're annoying me. Like, you're hurting my feelings. Like, I'm like really upset up here. You're annoying me. I'm uncomfortable. I mean, she's really cute. Like, I just went off. And he goes, that's closer. And it was the first time that I went, wow, I'm in touch with how I really feel. I'm expressing it, and that's okay in this forum.
Was that a big light bulb moment for you?
Huge. To this day, it feels like yesterday.
Wow.
And that was when I felt like, for an actor, it wasn't to make it or make money or be on TV. I was like, oh, I can do this and find who I really am, because I had no self-esteem, no self-confidence, and then express it and be okay with that. And people are encouraging that, whereas at home I couldn't do that. You know what I mean?
How brilliant to start with improvisation, though. Most people find improvisation later after they're doing rigorous actor training, and it was brilliant that you started out in that place. And that book, Keith Johnstone's Improv.
You've read that, right?
Best.
Oh, it's
brilliant.
One
of those best books.
Yeah, and I think it's a foundational thing. I mean, improv has its place in learning about your voice and learning your instrument, and we'll get into instrument obviously a little bit later, but that was my first kind of instrumental workout that I was indirectly aware of what he was doing. And he had said, if you can, improv is a tool to get you to do nothing more than what you're feeling moment to moment in the moment, in imaginary circumstances. And that was when I first heard those terms, and I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Whoa, that's a little bit heady. But, and so I worked with him for 4 years.
Wow.
Almost every second or third weekend, we'd have improv games all weekend, and he had a class at the university, and I had not gone to it. I just went to his class. I hadn't gone to school there yet or whatever. And so that was my first foray into kind of experiencing instrumentally, being present, being real, and being honest. And when I was in New York, I came across Eric when I read No Acting Please. I mean, that was 10, 15 pages in. And I said, I don't know where the fuck this guy is, but I'm going to meet with him. I mean, it was almost like meeting, like, Christians want to meet Jesus. Like, I was like, where is this cat? So I remember calling his office, and he wasn't married to Susanna yet at this time. This is 97 or 98. And he... no one answers, and there's this message, and I think it's Jeff's message. It wasn't him. It was his son left a message. Yeah. Eric is not here right now, but this is the Eric Moore Studios. I'm like, holy fuck, there's an Eric Moore Studio. But I didn't know if he was alive. 20 minutes later, I get a phone call. Hi, this is Eric. And I'm like, yeah, right. Eric Morris? And he goes, is there anybody else named Eric Morris? Like, he was annoyed right off the bat. Like, so, Eric, so honest and real, and like, so what do you want? I said, well, I want to study with you. And he's like, all right, we got class Monday night, Tuesday morning, Wednesday night, and we got this, whatever. And they had intensives and jamborees. You had to be accepted into that stuff and picked. And that's when it all started with him,
And you called him when you were in L.A. or you were
I called him when I was still in New York, and then I came back to Vancouver, and then I got a show in L.A.
Right.
I kind of skipped maybe a couple of years, but I went to Vancouver to really
So you're
start.
working this during this time when you're saying, oh, I want to learn the craft before I work. But you started working.
I started working when I felt I had the confidence to. I was actually helping casting directors read for a while when I was in Vancouver.
What a great thing to do.
And just learning the casting thing, because I had very low self-esteem and self-confidence. Even then, still, I was I was 24, I think, or 23. I'd had some big agents in Vancouver, at least in Vancouver, who wanted to sign. I was like, no, I'm not ready. And then Stuart Aikens was a casting director, a huge Canadian casting director, like, doesn't cast anymore, but he did all the big movies. And he was somebody that had this big symposium, he called it, and there'd be hundreds and hundreds of actors from all over the country. And he would do this whole 7 days in a row of monologues and scenes. And you paid, I don't know, $80 for the week or something. You went in and you did this thing, and he'd set you up, and you only got it right there. You didn't take it home. He was like, here it is. Every day was something new. And I thought, well, this is an exploration. I didn't have any fear of, am I going to be good enough? I was just like, I'm not ready. And I had some friends of mine that I felt were not ready either, but they were working. And I was waiting tables and slinging drinks and just being like, dude, like, you just made that, and, you know, can't even walk in a straight line and talk at the same time, but they're working. You know, one of those kind of cats, and, you know, really handsome, but, you know, and I was just not as handsome or maybe not as tall, or, well, apparently now I am, but no, I'm kidding.
6'4".
Yeah, apparently. I'm a good 5'11", okay? Let's keep it real. But so I went to this symposium, and I've told you about a buddy of mine named Dave, who owns a school in Vancouver, one of their top schools. Well, he was an actor then, a little bit older than me, obviously, and went to a really great school out there. And he was there, and I was there, and there was like actors all over the place. Like, I thought I was in a cattle call for some commercial or something, and I was just like, this is a joke. How the hell are you gonna, like, what are we doing here? And there was 2 rooms, and him and his associate had all like 150 here and 100 here. I mean, huge rooms. And we all had scenes, and I had a scene with this girl. I remember her name is Teresa. I can't remember her last name. Fiery redhead, and she thought, it was one of those, like, you know, she was dressed like an actress, and she thought she was so. And I can't remember the scene. It was from a TV show at the time, like The Sentinel or some like sci-fi thing they were doing then. And we had this long scene. It was just a really simple scene of me coming in and asking her out on a date. It was very simple the first couple of days. We did that. I think I did 5 monologues, 4 scenes, an introduction about who I was or whatever. And then every day it would wheedle down. Like, kids would either be said, you know, you're not ready, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, it was a competitive thing. And they were trying to find 10, 15 of the up-and-coming best actors in Canada to go off and get agents and stuff. So I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I thought nothing's going to happen. And every day it started getting smaller and smaller, and I was still allowed to come back. And I remember I did one monologue, and I was in my head, and I wasn't inclusive. It wasn't where I am actually years later as an artist, instrumentally or even craftually, and I was just like, oh, fuck. And I got down, and there was about 35 kids at the last day. And a lot of these, some of them are professional actors that have already been working. And I think I was one of the only ones that I don't even have an agent. And Dave came over to me, and he goes, are you from Alberta? And I went, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I'm from Edmonton. And I made some snarky remark about the Edmonton Oilers hockey team and Calgary Flames. And we just kind of clicked.
Such a Canadian.
And well, it is, right? And they put us together in a scene. And I was like, I can't remember the name of the scene. It wasn't scenes from plays. It was scenes from scenes of TV, because it was more of a TV and film kind of thing. And we did this scene, and I can't remember, but I do remember that we were connected and we were there. Not that I knew what I was doing at the time. And everybody really liked it, whatever. And then that day, he called me in. He called me and another girl, and then Dave went into the other room. And we all met with Stuart. And at the end of the whole thing, they picked me and Dave as the 2 actors that they were going to submit to Timon Stewart, who was the biggest agent in Western Canada. And he signed me, and I think I went on my second audition and booked 5 episodes in some show called Madison. And then I was like, so I thought what I was going to do is make as much money as I could here to live maybe in Vancouver through pilot season. Those were the years where people would go in Vancouver for wherever, Toronto, in Canada, and work, and then make that money and then go off to pilot season from January and April. This is back in the day when that was pilot season. It's not the same now, obviously. Right. And I went down my first year, and I auditioned for a show. No green card, no legal papers. I mean, I had been wrangling up all my papers to show the government here in America that I'm the most special actor in the world, you know. But it was just to show them that no one could do what I could do. You know, it's all a bunch of political bullshit. But I was wrangling a lot of these papers, letters of reference and stuff. And I had an audition opposite in a show called Strong Medicine for Lifetime, their flagship TV show. And I was dating a girl, and I was living with her, and we were just not getting along. And I remember, I'm not getting this. I had been going on auditions. I'd had 4 or 5 auditions, but I was getting close. And I tested 3 times, which I thought, if I don't get it, it's not I guess that was a big deal, but I didn't realize how big of a deal it was. Right. The casting director for that was casting this. And she's like, called my agent. I didn't even have anybody in LA, and called my agent in Toronto or in Vancouver, and said, where is he? Is he still in town? They can't find this guy, which is the love interest for Janine Turner from Northern Exposure on the show. Well, he doesn't have his green card. He's getting a little discouraged, so he wants to come back. So I had an offer to do a TV movie there. And she says, let me work something out. So just have him audition. So I came in, and I read with some cast director on tape. I think it was Lori Sugar, who's out of the business now. I think she works at Universal. As I'm leaving the door, they asked me to wait around. I read again with the casting director, who I'd met at the screen test. She was very polite, had a lot of great things to say about, sorry you didn't get that, but this is, we're having a hard struggle, and don't worry about it, we can give you no 1 or whatever. And then I go back, And I get home, and the next night they call me to screen test for it. So now I got to go to another screen test, and went over to Lifetime went over to Sony and did it with Janine Turner, who as a kid I was like Northern Exposure, like Janine Turner, And she was lovely, and we did it. And then I went out.
Are you freaking out? Are you nervous?
I'm a lot. The actor I am now, as opposed to then, is a 360-degree different human being. I needed to please. I needed to be good. I was nervous. I didn't know the process, but at the same time, I was a fairly new actor, and I was still trying to find my work, my voice, my process was. I was still learning things. I was still. I hadn't even really gotten. I mean, I've been working with Eric, but not really, with Eric, you got to go levels. It's all about instrumental first, and then we'll get into craft and work for choices and sense memory and all these different elements that are the foundation and crux of your process and your craft. But I was learning that, but I wasn't. This was, I'm 44 this year, so it's like this was years ago. It was 20 years ago, or 22 years ago, or 19 years ago. And then I read and read, and then they said, "Can you wait around?" And I waited for like 4 hours. I mean, I was just waiting around the cafeteria, going, "What do we do? This seems surreal." Like in normal tests, like I'm so experienced. Like I've done three of them. I'm like, guys, back in the day, And they, I didn't have a cell phone, and so I'm sitting there waiting, and I just got frustrated. This is the part of me that I think later on. This is the part that was real that I had not allowed because I was so needing to please. But I basically walked into the door and I knocked on the door, and they were eating they were waiting for the network to say yes to my tape. And there was 3 other guys there. And I said, "Guys, what's going on?" And the casting assistant just started laughing because I thought I was being rude maybe. And she was like, "Oh, we're just waiting for results." She goes, "I'm sorry, it's basic cable. It's a little different, whatever." And I was like, "Okay, can I just go home and you call me if I get it or not?" And she was like, "Oh, honey, well, if we haven't heard by now that you're getting it, yeah, you can go." Which means I probably didn't get it. I'm driving my girlfriend's car because I didn't even have it. It's like I'm like, it's rogue time, man. And I'm driving, and I lived in New York, so this was all easy for me. I could do that. And as I'm driving, I keep thinking, why would they keep me there for? I was pissed. Like, why would you waste my time for 3 hours? And by the time I got home, I had 4 messages on my phone that I got the job. And they were actually going to call me to bring me back to tell me, but I didn't have a cell phone. I was in a car just driving down the 405, I think it was the 134 at the time. Yeah, the 134. Anyway, that was my first gig, and I was supposed to do 4 episodes. And I remember I was working with Eric on it. This is when he was doing coaching. He wasn't coaching as much, obviously, later on. But he said, there's no small roles, only small actors. He goes, give her everything you got because they might keep you around. It was a love interest, And I played an intern, and then the rest is history. I did 5 seasons and ended up running the emergency room. And Janine quit the show early and just stuck around. But it was because I gave it everything I had. With what talent and craft and ability I had at the time, it kept me around to get my green card and make a little bit of money and be able to stay in this country. And that's been a real blessing. So that's how it all started as far as getting into Los Angeles. And I've never been back to Vancouver as far as living there.
Let's talk about Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that experience and how it kind of changed. You'd worked with a lot of people before.
I worked with a lot of great teachers, yeah.
What was it about Eric? And you mentioned Keith Johnstone talking about that moment when you're real on stage and expressing yourself. And that's really the cornerstone.
And doing no more or less than what's happening in the moment to moment for you. Obviously at Juilliard, like the teachers there, and then Cindy Christensen and Ian over at Neighborhood Playhouse, which is all Meisner. He was one of his mentors, and I learned about being in the moment. That was their crux, the repetitive exercises and stuff. And then, at the studio, it was a very, very sense memory, effective memory. It was obviously creating things that aren't there and being affected by, your circumstances, and obviously working for choices and breaking a script down and analyzing the material. And so I was so blessed that, even at the studio in Canada and teachers I'd worked with, Keith Johnstone from England, I got a taste of, I think, all these different processes. And some I connected with and some I didn't. But the ones I didn't, years would go by and, I get that now. I understand what that means. We'd need hours to go through all that. Right. But when I got to Eric, I think I was mature enough as an artist and as a human being to be receptive to his teachings at that time. Because if I'd have got it in my early 20s, I probably would have been... even the first 2 or 3 years, I was just like, what the fuck is this? This is insane.
And what was insane about it?
I'd see somebody go up there that was experienced in the work, and I had never seen so much honest work ever. I never saw it. I saw moments when I was studying in Europe, but this stuff was at another level. Like you'd see somebody go up and do, Hamlet's monologue, to be or not to be or whatever, and it was all about suicide. And you see this person really work for choices to make them feel like they want to die and they don't want to be here anymore, and they're analyzing life and they're questioning their existence and really experiencing a moment of wanting to kill themselves, which got that energy of Hamlet's questioning, whether it's reverent or not to the material, questioning whether or not they want to live, and then right into the words. And I felt like there was a perfect carryover. There was no acting. The lines didn't feel like a monologue. They felt conversational. Like this girl was really, and it was an exercise. She wasn't Hamlet. It was a woman. I mean, a woman can play Hamlet, obviously, but it was just, we were very irreverent and we're exploring choices to make truth, and I just found it fascinating. Didn't know how to do it yet. Had moments, but it was just like, you'd see people that couldn't get arrested going up and doing, some were working, obviously, but you'd see people go up there Aaron Eckhart was in my class. I had some people come in there that were doing big stuff and struggling with the process and trying to work. And to see somebody at that level still trying to learn how to be irreverent, real, honest, organic.
Explain irreverence in Eric's terms.
Everybody wants to be good. They want to be right. They want to get the material right. They want to do a good audition. They want to work for choices that they think the material needs. That's being reverent. That's not the way you should go after the work. When you read a piece of material, how does it affect you? You're working for choices. It might be irreverent, but that's the most honest. So you can say, I love you a million different ways. A reverent actor is going to go, no, you got to say it like this. Well, why? And I always fought Eric. I was like, I don't understand why. You know what I mean? Why can't you? How do you feel right now? Well, I'm annoyed. I don't want to be here. I'm hungry. I'm pissed off. Then say, I love you. I love you. Well, why can't, if that's real, why can't you say I love you like that? Why does it have to be like, I love you? Because that's the concept of trying. That's what reverence is. Is reverent? Being reverent can be attached to concept a lot, and I was doing a lot of that. I remember my first I think my biggest breakthroughs happened my last couple of years with his work, and then working with you, and that was another transition in my process of learning to take A to Z and realize I don't need to do the actor you were mentioning with Eric back then. I did everything. Every book for every role. Like I'd get an audition and I'd put in more than anybody on earth, period. I don't care. And I'd come into that room. The problem is I'd be carrying everything I'd done, instead of trusting. And I had to leave the studio to learn that I can trust myself. And I think that's one of the great things you and I have been working on with my process. I'm still training. I'm still working with a coach and everything else, is trying to say, as soon as I read a piece of material, it's already happening. Because my instrument's been open and been affected. And trust that. I don't need to go, okay, I feel angry, I feel frustrated, I feel this is bringing up my mom and that experience. Let me write all that down. Now I'm learning to not have to write it down and just trust it's there.
When did that kind of fluency start for you? When did that really kick
I'm in the process of that now. I think I'm still, I think Christmas Encore, I did a movie called A Christmas Encore, and they had 11 drafts of the script while we're shooting. Full-on changes. Like, it wasn't like revisions like normal show. There was no script. It was a constant change, and it wasn't a David Milch production. It wasn't like, it was somebody who really kind of said, we have a script and had a great reputation, we're just going to go to work. Well, when the network finally read the script, we were day 2 in and they didn't like it, so we had to change it all the time. And I felt that we'd have my second day, we had 95-page revisions. So when you're at 11 o'clock at night after a 17-hour day shooting and they want to go back and change the script, I had scenes where I'm talking to somebody who's supposed to be Santa, and now there's no Santa, and now he's my dad. That changes the dynamic of everything. And so the lines were, and I could not do the work that I was doing, which Tom knows, which is I would read material and let it affect me, and then I would write down, how does it make me feel? Who does it remind me of? What does it remind me of? Those inevitably become choices that I would work for. But that takes time, reading a scene, writing it down. When you're in 120 scenes in a movie, you don't. And when this is happening, you got to read it. So I would read it. I'd memorize it with my assistant, the lines, like a laundry list or a phone book. And then I would just break it down real quick to know what's going on in the scene. And then I have to, analyze the scene and different things. But then I have to ask when I'm reading, all right, what am I feeling when I'm reading this? How's this making me feel? And sometimes I feel lost, I feel confused, I feel stressed out, I'm overwhelmed. Well, the character was feeling that throughout the whole script because he's trying to save his theater. And so by listening, it was already happening to me subconsciously. If you really, like Eric calls it, mastertude, when you really get to be a master, it's already happening. You can read something and it's already starting to affect you. And I was learning that. I was forced to. I had been told by you years earlier, you're ready to do that, but still didn't trust it. So I still am in that process. But like last night, I just got a script that I'm producing now, and I read. Like I would have read it twice. I would have done impressions over the next 2 weeks. I would have wrote them all down. I read 50 pages, and I knew my instrument was saying that's enough. So I would read, and then I'd go and watch the masters, and I'd come back, and I'm just trying to. And Tom and I can, he can attest to this. I'm just trying to be more economical and practical. I used to do A to Z, the process, like impressions, analyze the script, ask questions, do method work. I mean, all that stuff that you're taught. But after 25 years of studying this process or any process, you realize the one hardest part is trusting your instincts and trusting your impulses. And I've had to learn over that I can do A, D, F, G, and that's enough. Because it's already happening. I don't need to write it all down. I still struggle with it, and it's just part of the process. But I try to work with emotions, with feelings, not thoughts, but experiences, tangible choices, people, places, and I work for those. I'm rarely in the last 10 years, 15 years, I rarely ever, when I'm talking to an actress I'm working with, am I talking to the actress? I'm always working for choices that elicit, like if I'm in love with someone, and I'm working with like Lacey Chabert. I've done a lot of work with her over the last couple of years because we were producing a show together. And I mean, she's my friend, and I can use a little bit of the love I have for her as a human being, but it's not enough romantically, but it's there. So the available stimulus is enough, but I'm in love with my wife. So because of my sense memory experience, and because of that training, I can work through imaginary dialogue with my wife. So when people see me talk to Lacey, I'm actually talking to my wife, but I'm inclusive of what Lacey's doing. And that's taken a lot of trust. Does that make sense? It's very confusing, but
no, it's not.
So, and when I'm really reading, like whatever choices are coming up, I don't edit concept or be reverent. I accept it. Like if you read a scene, a lot of young actors, and I did this for years. I'd go into an audition or I'd go into a show and I'd read a scene, and I'm interrogating somebody. I'm a cop in a scene or something. Well, everybody knows what that conceptually is, But I would try to do that the way it was supposed to be done. Whereas now I'll read that scene and I'll just let it affect me. And sometimes I feel bored. I'll feel annoyed. I'll feel, who cares? And you'll watch like First 48 or some of these cop shows, which I'm doing research. And when you interrogate a person 15, 20 times a day, you get bored. You get uncomfortable. But the actor doesn't want to use that because he thinks that that's not right. That's not correct. Well, that's what's really organically happening. Like we would have, when I was with Eric, then I got into the intensive, which is you have to be chosen in. And then I became kind of one of the oldest students, one of the ones that were the longest running students, and I would help show an external, or I would help, that's dealing with animals and stuff. We can get into all that. But I would help with I knew the process maybe better than some younger actors that would come in, and I would work with them, and I would go to the jamborees, which were up in Lake Arrowhead, and I just was engulfed 24 hours a day with his process for 12 years. And then I just realized I'm never going to grow if I don't step out of this and trust my instincts instead of always being, okay, Eric, Susanna, what do you guys think? And that was the hardest thing to do. It was like a divorce, but it was the best thing for me because I was forced to go, okay. And it wasn't like when I worked with Tom, it wasn't like Tom would say, this is what the choices are. It was like, how does this make you feel? Like, what are you going to, and I would feel this, and he'd go, let's try it. Which I needed to learn that, I needed to learn to trust my instrument instead of trusting the process. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So.
If I may, I usually don't chime in.
Yeah.
You seem to be very connected in the moment while you're working emotionally and to yourself. So sense-wise, has there ever been a time, or did you find it to be more often than not in class and or when you're filming, that you
Right.
take where you felt super uncomfortable with the work? Would you maybe wondering if you've made the right choices? Like, have you found that more often than not you're uncomfortable, and then that ends up being
a better place to be? For example, this happens all the time. You're in a scene and you just go blank. Or I'm like looking at her and I'm wondering, this scene's dead. Well, that's the critic. That's the editor in you. That's the critic. That's the need to be good. Now I don't do that. I just, I'm lost. I don't know. I know my lines. Did I say it the right thing? I include that in the scene. So in the moment, I'm lost as the actor. I'm playing this macho detective who's trying to hit on this girl who's working with me, and I'm telling her I really have feelings for you. Whatever the scene is, that's just being very arbitrary. But within that, I'm still working for, I'm attracted to you, I want you to know I like you, and maybe we can go out sometime. But within that, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm feeling nervous. And that could be elicited by the choices, or the fact that there's also, you're working for your choices to get the engine going, but once they say action and you're in the moment, it's right here. But what's happening right here is 99.9% of the juice isn't the choice. That's what starts it. It's what's happening right here. And Tom and I could be doing a scene, and he could just look down like this because the spoon fell or something in the scene. Most actors would go, oh, shit, the spoon fell. The scene's going off the rails. The geniuses that are out there will go, which I've worked with some that are just like mind-blowingly good. This is something that De Niro, or this is what Brando, I think, was so great when you really watch him, is he didn't care about what people thought, really, deep down. I think that's a great instrumental place to go. But I think he included everything. I always say to young actors I work with, include. How do you feel right now? Well, I'm lost. Well, then include it. Because the audience isn't going to see an actor lost. He might see something like, is he really in love with her? Like, there might be something happening that you think, I'm fucking lost, or I don't know what I'm doing. But the audience, oh my God, because it's real. You know, like I'm a big believer that you can say I love you a million ways. Oh, totally. So nothing's wrong. Everything's a 6 to me, meaning as long as it's authentic. I've been in scenes, I've put stuff on tape with Tom, I come in, I've worked for a choice, I've been on stage, whether it's in New York or whether it's in Canada or whatever, and I completely am looking and seeing an audience staring at me like I'm maybe boring, or they're like, right? I'm already directly putting on them that they're bored. Maybe they're not, maybe they're going, this is fascinating. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I always think that if I'm in the middle of a scene, and I'm feeling like we just finished a movie before Christmas. That brings up this point. We had a scene in a room, a newspaper, and it just looked like IKEA. The set just looked bad. And I'm acting the lead, and I'm producing this, and it just looked terrible. It looked pastels. It had little colors. It just was cheap. But we had to shoot it. And I wanted to say we should get better sets, but we're already behind. So anyway, we go into the scene, but the whole time I'm in the scene with Lacey, and we're talking about the case, that's all I can't stop thinking about this fucking room. And so I'm telling her about the case, and I got long monologues about evidence and forensics and everything else, and I'm doing it, but I'm including this. And when I watch that scene, it's a wonderful scene between her and I, because she's in the moment reacting to what I'm doing, but I'm doing stuff where I'm like this. But it's not the scene. I'm going, this fucking room. While I'm saying, to be or not. Like, I've been on stage with Eric, and he'll say, I want you to do this. Let's say, to be or not to be. Is that the question? You know, the Shakespeare monologue, whatever. And don't work for a choice. Don't do anything. Just stand there. How do you feel? It's a being workout. I feel nervous. I hate Shakespeare. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm wondering if this girl really likes me because I've wanted to date you for a long time. I'm single now, but obviously you're probably married. And I don't know. I feel like a loser. My hair is so long. I want to cut it. To be or not to be. That is the question, whether it is to swing the arrows of outrageous. I don't know what I'm doing here, you know? But the monologue was brilliant. I wasn't reverent to the material. I wasn't working for anything for the material, which is fine. You still need to have a level of reverence to the material. I mean, if he's suicidal, I'm obviously not. But it still was real. And you learn that if you include how you feel as the actor, still do your work moment to moment, it doesn't look like acting. And so that's the thing that was my passion. That's still my passion. You know, not fame and money, all that bullshit. It's when I watch a scene like the scene I showed you with Lacey and I at the end of the movie. We walk away, and there's a moment where I stop and I look at her. And I'm working for my wife, who went through cancer treatment, because the scene is about her leaving me and we'll ever see her again. So I'm working for my wife. But while I'm working for my wife, Lacey missed her cue to stop. She just kept fucking walking because she was off camera. Well, most actors go, can we do it again because she didn't stop on her cue? Got to include it. And I just gave her a look and I went, and inside the actor's going, is she ever going to stop? But on camera, when you saw that scene, it looks like I'm burning up, fearful that I'm going to lose this person, and confused as to what I'm to do next. And it's a brilliantly real moment that I didn't work for. I just got goosebumps. It happened organically. Me 10 years ago, and I'm sure casting and Eric and some people can attest this because I've seen it in my work grow. But 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh shit, she didn't stop. Instead of including the oh shit, I totally disconnect from the moment. And that's something that can't be trained. That takes time. We can be trained, but it takes time to learn. It's
but
just
how full circle is that? Like you talked about Keith Johnstone and improvisation. I mean, no, not denying everything, accepting everything, being open to receiving anything that's happening in the moment. I mean, it's like you came full circle and you started.
Yeah, and I think and without that training, I wouldn't have been able to keep learning what Eric was doing, and and it's. Like now, I'll read a scene. It makes me feel a certain thing, and then I'll make sure I have my lines down. I'll analyze it. I'll do my research. I'll meet with detectives because I'm playing a role like that right now. And I was telling him that I woke up this morning after reading 50 pages, and I felt we've talked about this with this character that I'm doing, Detective Logan. My voice register drops for some reason. Whenever I start reading him, I get into this. When I read it, I feel heavier, masculine, grounded, stronger. And it's, there's elements in the script about, the way he moves and how a detective is, he's so strong, he's protective of her. I'm not reading it and going, okay, so I got to be protective. Let me work for something. I'm just reading it. No, when I started, I had to do that. But now I feel like it just is happening with me trusting. But I still had to do all, like you said, full circle. I didn't get to this place by just going, I got to trust myself. I had to go through 25 years of training to go, oh, fuck. I got to just trust myself, but you got to go through that stuff. And I'm still training and learning and growing and
you had to consciously early on, and I think a lot of actors try to skip that part. You had to consciously do the work. Like if you were playing a detective, you consciously make choices. Mm-hmm. And now what's really fun working with you, depending on the part we're working on, he's going to come in a totally different energy.
Without me consciously trying to work. Yes, I'm still working for choices, but I'm working from a place of, like I used to work, if this was a scene, whether it's an audition or I'm working with him or I'm in a movie, and it'd be like, he walks in the door and he sees her. He's smitten. He lights a cigarette, asks her if she wants one. Okay, I'll read that. Well, I don't smoke, but I'll read that, and I'll go, okay, I don't smoke. I'm attracted to her. Well, who does that remind me of? That's wrong. That's the need for me as the actor to get it right. What I do is I just read it. And as I'm reading it, after I've logied, which is an exercise to be open, and I read it, I'm already having images of a person. I'm always smelling, like right now I smelt Red Door perfume. And sensorily working for that, going, well, that's interesting. Why is that coming up? And that reminds me of Katina, my girlfriend I had in New Mexico, who did smoke. And it annoyed me. And so now that's bringing something deeper and personal. So I said, okay, well, maybe that's what's coming up. I don't know. We'll see. As we read, as we work, it's still there. It's still there. So when I walk into that room, this is affecting me. And the choices are coming from me being open and reactive and organically experiencing what this is affecting, as opposed to being an actor who wants to get it right and is with the big agency and he's going in for the big move and he reads it and he goes, all right, I know what to do, Tom. I'm going to talk to my dad here or whatever. I think the best actors are the dumbest ones. I think the brain is the editor, and it gets in the way of everything. And I think that I always tell my wife all the time, one of my greatest gifts is that I'm stupid. But I say it in snark, I just
so not true.
No, but you know what I mean. No, I'm not saying cerebrally.
I hear you. But then how do you match the analysis of a scene when you talk about analyzing?
Breaking it down and stuff.
Breaking it down, which there are certain things that happen in a scene. They are structured like a piece of music.
You still have to do your work. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I'm actually really obsessive about that. So that's the organic stuff that's happening. Now I always say I'm under the spell. I'm feeling things. People are coming up, images, places, smells, experiences, feelings. And let's say I wrote them down. Makes me feel like this. Who does it remind me of? And then I'll start analyzing it. And if the writer is writing, walks into a supermarket, 1982, right there, you got to make that real for yourself. It's not 2020 or 2019, it's 1982. So then I'll get into the social mores. I'll look at the attitude of the times. And as I'm researching that, maybe that brings back some of my youth when I was in my 80s. And so I break everything down from the same organic process. It's all about being affected. I used to when I was younger. She's wearing red shoes, and it's a plot point. Well, why? And I would cerebrally try to figure it out. Whereas now, I think over the last 5 years, 6 years, it's now I don't have the answer. I don't know. Let me just read it, let it affect me, and maybe it'll happen later where I understand why from an organic place as opposed to a cerebral place. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. So I don't, and I still, we still talk about it. You're still actually analyzing a script. He works when it says he, detective, he works at the precinct. Okay. When I read that line, the precinct that comes up for me is the Glendale Police Department, where I did my research with the sergeant because I'm playing a detective. And I'll do an effective memory, or I'll do something evocative images of the place. So I feel like I see that place on the day when I'm in that space, because that affects you. You feel safe there. That's your job, but not from a cerebral place like, okay, it's in a precinct. I need a precinct. What should I work for? So I'm breaking the script down the same way I'm doing impressions, from an organic, how it makes you feel.
How about
place.
beats in a scene?
I do beats too, but I do them more vocally now. I used to write them down. What are my needs in this scene? I need to figure out this case. I need to gather evidence. I need to know what's going on. I'm only saying this, prefacing this, because this is what we're going to be working on the next. I need my dad's help. I need connections. I used to write all that down. That takes a long time. But now, when I'm reading it, if I don't have time, usually on the plane or whatever, I won't write it down, but it's like, I'll consciously do some conscious work with needs and then throw it away. I don't go into a scene going, what do I need here? And then when I get to a scene, I'm usually like, I know my lines, I know what the scene's about. What do I want to feel? Character I've already worked for. My character obligations, strong, protective, whatever. And then emotionally, I feel confused, curious, interested, analytical. And in relationship to her, it's the need for us to work together to find out who killed this guy, who did this crime, where's the evidence? And those choices that make those real for me is, what comes up a lot is still Tony and what happened. I had a guy that owned a production company, and then he was robbed and they stole everything, and no one ever heard from him again. He left the business. And so I always wondered, Brennan always wondered, what happened? What happened there? How did he lose $17 million? How did he leave and no one ever, what happened? Who stole from him? And the guy was dead. Well, he was, it's a metaphor. He was dead. He was killed. This whole company was destroyed. How did this happen? So, but not from a cerebral place, but I genuinely, that choice is coming up for me right now. So when I'm needing to find the evidence, I'm doing maybe an inner monologue of needing to find out, well, what happened to Tony before the scene starts? And then once the scene starts, and I say to her, we got to talk to his ex-girlfriend Veronica on Sunday afternoon and see where she was, because obviously she was on a cell phone, whatever. But that's feeding the need from an organic place as to what's my objective. Because you can't play an objective. How do you play I want water? How do you become cerebral? And a lot of actors that either I've worked with or helped coach, you got to get out of this. So how do you want that water from an organic, experiential place? You create the thirst.
Maybe. So you know what the want and need is, and then try to create it so you organically really
experiencing it organically and from a personal place as opposed to a cerebral place. Lines to me, like Graham and Unreal, tons of monologues. Lines are meaningless. Lines are meaningless. It's the behavior that turns people on and makes people excited to watch. And a lot of Monty Clift's brilliance was he was so vulnerable and so tortured about his own sexuality, in my opinion, and about the times that no matter what he was doing, he was including him. And you could always see this guy that was so uncomfortable in the moment. He looked always uncomfortable. You're too fucking young to know who I'm talking about. That's sad. I'm kidding. Go watch his. But he's.
What would you suggest he watch? The first.
Red River, probably.
There were three that came up kind of in a cluster. In
Here
a way.
to Eternity.
There was Marlon Brando,
yeah.
James Dean, and Montgomery Clift.
Yeah.
Those were three actors that kind of changed the way people kind of think about acting. There was the Laurence Oliviers, there was the John Gielguds in the theater, and then there was these guys, and it was a whole new.
Where are you going, child?
It was a whole new wave of a different way to think about acting.
But you're right. Those English, those were still mentors of mine growing up. They did such great character work in there. But it devolves into this. I mean, Last Tango in Paris. If you get a chance to watch that with Marlon Brando, there's a scene where they're about to have sex, and he pulls out a butter. Remember he pulls out the big thing of butter. Right. That wasn't in the script. But that's what Brando would do. He's like, I want butter, and everybody's like, what? And Bertolucci, the director, said, what the fuck? The scene where he went and saw the woman who died, his mother. Well, his mother had passed away a month earlier. Right. He's talking to his mother. The lines are totally different, but he's talking to his mother and crying, and it's real. That's what I'm trying to say. And James Dean and Monty Clift and all these cats do that. I mean, obviously, so does a lot of actors now. That's the process that everybody fights for. But one of the greatest thing I always get, or when I do get it, not always, but when someone says, Did you improvise that? I always feel like
That's
you're
such
not
a high
acting.
compliment.
Oh,
What a
I get it
compliment.
all the time. Like, are you improvising? No, it's word for word. Now, I got to work my ass off to make that happen. But when someone says it looks like it's, and I don't like this word, it looks so natural. That's not what I'm saying. It just looks human. And it looks like, are you improvising? What's going on? No, that's the way it should look if you put in the work and you're working organically. And look, I mean, I hit and miss. I mean, all of us are not perfect. I'm not putting myself in that category by any means. But when someone watches it that knows you or doesn't know you and go, I buy and believe everything. And that's what that, did you improvise that? Because everybody associates that improv is, oh, well, that makes it look more honest when that's not the case, you know? So making things look like it's real life, you know? So.
Talk to us a little bit about instrumental work. And Tommy, you were talking about how you've sat in my class and co-taught with me.
Yep.
Or I just let you do your thing.
Yep.
Tell me about your experience watching.
Yeah, as an observer watching you when you were a guest in Tom's class, it was an experience because it was almost like, and it's funny when you talked about strong medicine, because I feel like you were a doctor. You would look at an actor in class and you would be able to instantly like diagnose what was going on with them, what they needed. And then it was like you had your scalpels and your tools. You were able to, like, in an instant, find exactly the right exercise, exactly the right kind of process for them to have in the moment to make a breakthrough. It was amazing. And it was so quick and facile, too.
To me, you can teach acting in 6 months. Acting, analyzing a script, working for beats, in my opinion. The instrument's lifelong. And I think 90% of acting is the instrument. And what I mean by that is being open, being affectable, going with your impulses, trusting, reacting, doing no more or less than what's happening moment to moment, and trusting that's okay. You know, all that stuff takes years and years. I mean, it's an ongoing battle. And if you see it, if an actor, I can only say for myself, when I started, I was so instrumentally blocked. I was so closed off. I was so in fear of being open. I didn't want to share how I felt about anything. You know, if you and I were in a scene and Tom was like, well, how do you feel about him back in those days? I would have said whatever I could say to get out of the situation of uncomfortability. I like him. He's cool. I like those shorts, whatever. But inside, I was feeling like, how fucking old is this guy? Like, you cannot tell me, and why leave from Chicago? And you know, how do you get feathers in your hair like that? Like, just whatever. And no, I'm serious. And include that into the scene. I could do that because my instrument's open and I'm affected by that. But I couldn't do that for years. And it was frustrating to me. Because I think, was trying to get it right. You try to please the casting directors, you try to do a good job. And I think that the instrument is a very, very important part that's not taught enough. Because then you start getting into psychology and you start getting into emotional life, and it's scary. And a lot of these schools don't want to be, and there's insurance policy. There's, you just can't go there. I do, and if I see a guy up there, and it has nothing to do with talent, because your instrument's where your talent is, in my opinion. And I'm sure they're all talented, but if you're instrumentally blocked, if you can't say how you feel off camera here, then how are you going to do it? How am I going to believe what you're organically feeling on camera? Yeah. If you can't say, how do you feel? Like 10, 15, 20 years ago, whatever, but how do you feel, Brennan? I feel good. I feel excited. I'm a little nervous, but I'm cool. That's bullshit. How do you feel? I feel insecure. I feel bloated. I hate that cheat meal last night. I feel sick to my stomach. I don't know. I'm pissed off at my mom. She's such a cunt sometimes. I'm just, that's real. Now that might make people go, this guy's nuts, or I don't like him, or whatever. But you're acting. An actor's job isn't to be liked. An actor's job is to just be. You decide if you like it or don't like it. But you have to be real. And to get to that truth and that honesty and that reality, yes, you're right. It takes a lot of work. And then you realize there's part of your process you don't need to do as much because you don't need to squeeze the lemon as hard because you know how to get there. But I still, Tom can attest this, I still have high levels of self-esteem and insecurity about just trusting and not doing as much.
Well, it sounds like it's still a process for you, which is brilliant. But I guess I'm curious if there's somebody like listening now that's like, okay, I think I might be blocked. Like I might be seriously instrumentally blocked.
Right.
How would you get them to start the process?
Well, you'd have to have them do a being workout, and I would have to see where those blocks are. I mean, maybe they're comfortable by being funny, right? So because that covers the need to feel uncomfortable or vulnerable. They have struggles with being vulnerable. Maybe they are mind-mouth orientated, where everything is like cerebral. So you do exercise to get them in the gut. My thing was I was very insecure. I felt like whatever I had to say or feel wasn't good enough, so I wasn't going to say it. And Eric would put me through ego work. I am enough. I am good looking. I have something to say. I care. I don't care. I care about this. I don't care if you don't like me. Like exercises that get me to a place where I feel safe going to with what I feel. But those were my instrumental. I have a very, very good friend of mine. Him and his girlfriend were in class, and she was afraid of sexuality. She was not a sexual person. So there's exercises for that too. Mm-hmm. Blatant sexuality, pump grind. I mean, different exercises that get you in touch with your sensuality. And it took her almost a year. Like she'd get on stage and have to literally touch herself under her clothes and everything for like a year to get comfortable with her own sexuality. Mm. So that was an emotional block for her. Mm. What if she got a role where she had to do a sex scene? She can't do it. Can't do it. Well, now she can. If I had to do a scene where I was like totally cool and confident, no way. No way. And if I did, it was false. Whereas now, I think I could do it from more of a truthful, honest place because I believe I'm enough. And that sounds kind of psychological, but I am enough. And if you really believe you're enough, then in the moment, those instincts will come up, and you'll just go with them because you trust them. If I say, fuck you, there's a million instincts that just came up in him. Well, an actor has to just let those fly and go to be or not, let that happen. But in society, we're taught, okay, don't respond. You'll go to detention. Your mom will get mad at you. Actors are the most, that's what I mean by irreverence. The irreverence to the normal society. We have, like Brando would have classes and have his students walk around naked outside. And the exercise was, you guys have to, artists are naked. We're open. If you can't do that, how can you do it on camera?
Didn't you have a friend in
that went to his class?
Yeah.
Yeah, Asaf. He's a client with my manager. He's
this
great.
This is a legendary class that was actually taped.
It was canceled because it was so the people were freaked out.
Sean Penn was in the class. Mm-hmm. Leonardo DiCaprio, Robin Williams.
Yeah, they all would go and visit. It was the first time he ever taught acting, and he did it on one weekend, and it was one weekend only. And he got out. He was like 4 hours late, and he got up, and he was like wearing pajamas.
Dressed as a woman.
And the second day, he had lipstick on and a wig, and people were just like, this guy's fucked in his head. But he was, I'm gonna wear a wig today. But his purpose was to say, I don't give a shit what you think about me. I'm fine with this. That's why when I have an instinct or a choice to work for or an impulse, I'm going to go with it. And it's going to be so irreverent to everybody else's concept, but it's real. Like the nuts in Apocalypse Now when he was eating, he goes, I just was bored. I wanted to eat something. It wasn't like some massive actor's moment. It was like, but he was the greatest inclusive actor I'd ever watched on film, in my opinion. He'll do stuff like this and...
No, there's a moment in the movie Missouri Breaks when he's like he's looking over this casket
and
of his
he does his tooth,
and the guy's on ice, right? They're keeping the body on ice, and he's got a toothache, and he takes a chunk of the ice and he's putting it on his mouth to get rid of the toothache. And I just think that's the most amazing.
And his role didn't have a toothache. Marlon did, and Marlon was like, "I need some ice. My teeth's fucking killing me," and then kept doing the scene. Well, we're not taught like that, In life, it's like you come home and you cry, and someone says, "Don't cry." You come home and you go, I don't want to go to McDonald's, Mom. Right. Well, you get a detention. We're always taught in life to not
stifle
go with
our impulses.
Absolutely. Yeah. School, to me, is evil. It's a necessary evil, but it's evil. I fight with my wife, who's an academic all the time. You go in, you got 100 kids or 10 kids or 1,000 kids, and they're all learning the exact same curriculum, but they're all from different backgrounds. They have different upbringings or different religious beliefs, whatever, different viewpoints and everything, but they got to learn the exact same thing. And if one guy has this kind of weird upbringing and this kind of guy has this weird upbringing and he gets a C and he gets an A, he's a better person. That's fucked. So now that guy who got a C goes, oh, I'm not good enough. So when you come into acting, you got to get rid of all that shit because you got to find who you are, express who you truly are, whether people like it or not. And those are the real masters, And I am excited at the future for me, but I wish I knew what I knew now back then. Because, you go into some casting rooms, I'm going to really do this. And now I don't get nervous. And I think the nervous was the need to please, the need to do good and get the job. It's now just do. I watched this actor, the guy who's in Hellboy. No,
David Harbour?
Yeah, who I actually like. I like his stuff. And I was just watching this interview, and he said, once I realized I wasn't going to be a movie star, and I wasn't going to be handsome like these movie stars, and I wasn't going to be this huge, and I just said, fuck it. You know, I'm a kind of a pudgy, overweight guy who's got a weird-looking face and is intense, and that's who I am, and I'm going to accept it. He goes, I just never stopped working. And it was just because he accepted that when I go into a room, this is my work, whether you like it or not. You know, like Eric would say, you took a shit. If you don't like the smell, I don't give a shit. You know, there's the shit, you know? And it's not an arrogance. It's just a confidence, I think, in some level of I am enough, you know? So, anyway.
Amazing. Listen, I could talk to you forever.
Yeah, I know.
This, but I know
we'll do it again.
Can we do a part two
Yes,
sometime?
I'd love to. You guys,
we should do more, yeah.
Oh my God.
If I didn't have to go and watch, you know.
Brennan's going to the Renaissance
I'm going to the
Fair.
Renaissance Fair, which is to me one of the least fun things in the world. And it's like
But you could do acting there.
I feel like I'm walking into a theater class. Welcome to the Renaissance Fair. Where's my Falstaff? I'm like, holy fuck me dead. Like, where's the beer garden? I'm out of here, you know?